Year 2254, outer rim of the Andromeda sector, aboard the UHS Vanguard. The silence of space around the United Human Sector's Vanguard was deceptive, masking the tension that hummed through the ship like electricity through its conduits. Captain Elara Miles stood rigidly before the holographic star map that flickered in the dimly lit command center, her eyes scanning the multiple blips that represented the mysterious fleet they had encountered at the edge of known space. "Status report," Elara demanded, her voice cutting through the ambient noise of distant engine rumbles and soft beeps from the navigation consoles. "Unknown vessels maintain formation, Captain. No communications, no aggressive maneuvers," reported Lieutenant Harrow, his fingers dancing across the sensor panel. Elara nodded curtly, turning to face her crew. "Keep shields up and weapons on standby. We don't provoke, but we're not sitting ducks either." As the crew acknowledged her commands, a sudden burst of static crackled through the communications system. Every eye in the room snapped to the main console as an alien voice emerged, fragmented but decipherable. "Territory of the Raxian Dominion. You trespass. Explain." Taking a steadying breath, Elara stepped forward. "This is Captain Elara Miles of the United Human Sector's vessel Vanguard. We are on a peaceful exploration mission. We did not intend to enter your territory." The response was a long silence that stretched into minutes, thickening the air with anticipation and unspoken fears. Finally, the voice returned, more composed yet carrying an undeniable edge of threat. "Ignorance excuses not. Prepare to be boarded." Elara's jaw tightened. "I repeat, we are on a peaceful mission. We will not permit boarding. I suggest we arrange a meet to discuss this diplomatically." Another pause followed, longer this time, as if the unseen adversaries were considering her proposal, or perhaps planning their next move. "Coordinates transmitted. Meet there. Come alone," the voice finally decreed before the communication channel went dead. The coordinates pointed to a small, barren planetoid within the neutral zone, a place as desolate as it was convenient for a meeting, or an ambush. "Opinions?" Elara asked, glancing around at her senior officers. Commander Tyreek, her second-in-command, frowned. "It's a risk, Captain. But if there's a chance to avoid conflict, it might be worth taking." Elara nodded, already calculating the risks. "Prep a shuttle. Commander, you have the bridge. I'll handle this." As she left the command room, her mind raced with scenarios. Meeting with the Raxians could pave the way for peaceful relations or plunge them into a confrontation for which they were not fully prepared. Yet, the element of the unknown also presented an opportunity to assert humanity's place in this vast galaxy. Upon reaching the shuttle bay, Elara suited up for the short trip. Her pilot, Ensign Cole, gave her a reassuring nod as they boarded the small craft. The journey to the planetoid was swift, the shuttle piercing through the star-studded blackness towards the designated meeting point. As they landed on the rocky surface, Elara peered through the viewport at the bleak landscape that would serve as the stage for this crucial encounter. Stepping out onto the rocky ground, she was greeted by the sight of three tall, armored beings. Their skin shimmered with a metallic sheen, and their eyes glowed faintly beneath their helmets. The central figure stepped forward, its voice now clear without the interference of space. "Captain Miles. I am Commander Therrell of the Raxian Dominion." Elara studied him, noting the confident poise and the barely concealed hostility. "Commander Therrell, thank you for agreeing to meet." Therrell's head tilted slightly, a universal sign of scrutiny. "Humans are unknown to us. Your presence here could be seen as the precursor to invasion. We have no such intentions. Our mission is to explore and understand, not to conquer." Elara responded firmly, holding the alien's gaze. "We can coexist peacefully, but mutual respect is fundamental." Therrell seemed to ponder her words, his gaze shifting towards the horizon before returning to her. "Your words speak of peace, Captain. Actions will confirm them." "Agreed. Let's take this as an opportunity to learn from each other, rather than fear the unknown," Elara suggested. "Very well. We will observe. But know this, Captain, any transgression will be met with force." As the meeting concluded and Daryl's group departed, Elara allowed herself a brief moment to exhale. The encounter had been tense, but it was a beginning, a first step towards understanding or a precursor to inevitable conflict. Returning to the shuttle, she looked back at the desolate landscape, a silent witness to the tentative thread of peace being spun between human and alien. The stakes were high, and the path ahead uncertain, but she was determined to navigate it with the same resolve that had brought humanity this far into the unknown reaches of space. As the shuttle ascended, Elara felt the weight of the moment. The peace they sought was fragile, like the vacuum of space itself, vast, silent, and suffused with the potential for both creation and destruction. The UHS Vanguard hovered in the cold void, its steel-gray hull reflecting the distant light of a dying star. Inside the command deck, the atmosphere was thick with tension. Every officer was at their station, awaiting Captain Elara Miles' return. The recent encounter with the Raxian Dominion had shaken them, but no one dared voice their unease. Commander Tyreek, standing at the helm, broke the silence. "The captain's shuttle is approaching. Prepare for docking." The crew acknowledged with swift, precise movements. The hangar doors slid open, allowing the shuttle to ease into the docking bay with a gentle hum. As soon as the landing gear locked into place, Elara stepped out, her expression unreadable. Tyreek met her at the ramp. "How did it go?" Elara exhaled sharply, removing her helmet. "We're being watched. The Raxians are wary of us. They claim they'll observe, but I don't trust their restraint." She handed him a data pad. "Pull up all intel we have on their fleet strength and territory. I want to know exactly who we're dealing with." Tyreek nodded, already issuing the request to the ship's AI. "Did they give any demands?" "Not directly. Just veiled threats," she muttered, walking past him. "But there's something else. They fear us." Tyreek frowned. "Fear us? That doesn't make sense. We've never engaged with them before." "That's what worries me," she said. "They reacted too strongly for this to be just about territorial disputes." Before Tyreek could respond, the comm officer, Lieutenant Harrow, interrupted. "Captain, incoming transmission. Wideband distress signal. It's coming from an independent trading convoy near the neutral zone." Elara snapped to attention. "Put it through." The speakers crackled to life, the transmission distorted but urgent. "This is Freighter Arcadia, requesting immediate assistance. We are under attack." "There!" A burst of static cut through the message. Harrow worked quickly to clean the signal. "It's coming from Sector 12, right along the Dominion's claimed space." Elara's mind worked fast. If the Raxians were involved, it could mean they had already dismissed the so-called observation period. "Set course! Maximum speed!" The Vanguard lurched forward, its engines roaring as it accelerated. Within minutes, they arrived at the distress coordinates. The sight before them made Elara's stomach tighten. Wreckage floated through space, jagged metal shards drifting aimlessly. Fires still burned in the vacuum, flickering where oxygen had yet to be fully extinguished. Bodies, human bodies, were among the debris. Tyreek clenched his fists. "Survivors?" Harrow scanned the wreckage. "Detecting one life sign, weak but stable. A small escape pod among the debris." Elara wasted no time. "Get them aboard." Minutes later, the pod was secured, and medical teams worked swiftly. The survivor, a middle-aged man in a torn flight suit, was barely conscious when Elara reached the med bay. His eyes flickered open, locking onto hers. He tried to speak, his voice hoarse. They didn't even hesitate." "Who?" she pressed. "The Raxians," he coughed, wincing. "They attacked without warning. We hailed them, offered to stand down, but they opened fire anyway. No mercy. No demands." Elara's pulse quickened. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was extermination. "Did they say anything? Any reason for the attack?" she asked, but the man's strength was fading fast. "Only one thing." He swallowed hard, forcing the words out. "They said, 'Your kind is dangerous.'" The last syllable left his lips as unconsciousness claimed him. The medical team moved in, stabilizing his vitals. Elara turned sharply on her heel and stormed back to the bridge. The pieces were coming together, and she didn't like the picture they painted. The Raxians weren't afraid of humanity because of territorial disputes. They saw humans as a threat, a species too dangerous to exist. Tyreek was already at the tactical station, pulling up data. "Captain, long-range sensors are picking up movement." "It's them." On the main screen, the display filled with the unmistakable sight of Raxian warships advancing in tight formation. Their sleek, predatory design exuded menace. Harrow's face went pale. "They're moving straight for us." Elara's grip tightened on the console. She had been willing to entertain the idea of peace, of mutual understanding, but that hope was rapidly burning to ashes. "They ignored our warning," she said, her voice cold. "They never intended peace. This was always their plan." Tyreek's tone was grim. "Then what are our orders?" Elara straightened, her expression hardening. There was no hesitation in her next words. "We show them exactly why they should fear us." The Vanguard's engines rumbled, weapons priming for battle. The time for diplomacy had passed. Humanity would not bow. Not today. Not ever. The UHS Vanguard was a fortress in the dark, a silent colossus standing against the incoming tide of Raxian warships. The enemy fleet moved with precision, their formation tight, like a hunting pack closing in for the kill. On the bridge, Captain Elara Miles stood rigid, eyes locked on the holographic tactical display. The Vanguard was outnumbered, but numbers weren't everything. "Status on enemy fleet?" she asked, her voice steady. Commander Tyreek responded without looking up from his screen. 5 heavy cruisers, 3 frigates, and a battleship at the rear. Their ships are shielded, but our skins show gaps in their lateral defenses." Elara nodded, absorbing the details. "And us?" Lieutenant Harrow, manning the weapons console, clenched his jaw. "Our shields are at full strength. Railguns are primed, torpedo tubes loaded. We're combat ready." Elara turned to the crew, her voice carrying the weight of authority. "We gave them a chance. They ignored it. Now we make them regret that mistake." The Vanguard roared to life, its engines surging as it repositioned itself. The enemy ships spread out, moving into a pincer formation. The Raxians thought they had their prey cornered. They were wrong. "Open a channel," Elara ordered. A second later, the grim visage of Commander Thero filled the screen. His reptilian features twisted into what could only be amusement. "Captain Miles," he drawled, "you have been weighed and found wanting. Surrender, and we may spare some of your kind." Elara's eyes narrowed. "Funny. I was about to say the same thing to you." Thero's smirk faltered, replaced by a flicker of uncertainty. "You cannot win this fight." Elara's lips curled in a cold smile. "You're not the first to think that." She cut the transmission. "Fire!" The Vanguard struck first. Twin railguns thundered, hurling high-velocity projectiles through the void. The first slug tore through the nearest Raxian frigate, puncturing its shields and gutting its hull. The second shot followed a heartbeat later, reducing the ship to an expanding cloud of debris. The enemy hesitated. They hadn't expected that. "Target their formation's weak points," Elara commanded. "Don't let them regroup." The Vanguard twisted through space, a leviathan with the agility of a predator. Plasma burst from the Raxian fleet scorched past, barely missing as the human warship weaved through the firestorm. Tyreek pointed to the main screen. "Their cruisers are repositioning. They're adapting." Elara's mind raced. The Raxians were learning fast, but they still underestimated humanity. "Harrow, prepare a full spread of torpedoes," she ordered. "Target their center line." A moment later, torpedoes streaked through space, their ion trails glowing as they surged toward their marks. The first struck a cruiser's engine block, detonating in a chain reaction that split the ship apart. Another torpedo found its target in the weak spot of a second vessel, shattering its shields before a follow-up railgun shot finished the job. The Raxian fleet was bleeding. But they weren't finished. A deep, ominous pulse echoed through the ship as the enemy battleship opened fire. A plasma lance surged forward, striking the Vanguard's shields with a force that sent tremors through the hull. The lights flickered, and warning klaxons screamed. "Shields holding, but we can't take another hit like that," Harrow called out. Elara gritted her teeth. "Then we won't let them fire again." "Bring us closer." Tyreek's head snapped toward her. "Closer? You heard me. Get us in knife fight range." The Vanguard surged forward, closing the distance between itself and the Raxian battleship. The enemy, confident in their firepower, hadn't expected this level of aggression. "Divert power to forward shields," Elara ordered. "Prepare for a full barrage." The battleship loomed ahead, its hull bristling with weapons. But Elara saw the flaw, the arrogance in their design. They were built for dominance at range. Up close, they were vulnerable. "Fire everything!" The Vanguard unleashed hell. Ray guns, plasma cannons, and point defense lasers poured into the Raxian battleship at point-blank range. The first volleys peeled away its shields. The second ripped through its armor. Explosions bloomed along its spine as internal systems failed. Elara didn't give them time to recover. "Finish them!" A final railgun shot drove into the ship's core. For a split second, silence hung in the void. Then the battleship detonated, torn apart by the force of its own ruptured reactors. The shockwave rippled outward, scattering debris across the battlefield. The remaining Raxian ships hesitated. Their most powerful vessel was gone. Their formation was in ruins. The realization sank in. They weren't facing a weak species. They were facing something far worse. Elara turned to her crew, her expression unreadable. "Open a channel to the surviving Raxian ships." A fractured signal returned. A Raxian officer, his expression grim, appeared on screen. "Your battleship is gone," Elara stated. "Your fleet is broken. If you want to live, leave now." The officer hesitated. Then, without a word, the remaining ships turned and fled into the void. A murmur spread through the Vanguard's bridge. Relief. Victory. Tyreek exhaled slowly. "They won't forget this." Elara's gaze remained on the battlefield, watching the wreckage drift. Good. Humanity had sent its message. The galaxy would never see them the same way again. The wreckage of the Raxian fleet drifted through the void, burning remnants of arrogance and miscalculation. Silence settled over the battlefield, save for the occasional burst of flickering embers from ruined hulls. The UHS Vanguard stood alone, its hull scarred but triumphant. Humanity had made its statement, not with words, but with steel and fire. On the bridge, Captain Elara Miles observed the aftermath in quiet contemplation. The bridge crew had begun securing systems, running post-battle diagnostics, but no one spoke the obvious: the war wasn't over. Commander Tyreek approached, his voice measured. "No pursuit from the survivors. They've jumped out of the system." Elara's fingers drummed against the armrest of her chair. "They'll be back. But not today." Lieutenant Harrow looked up from his console, eyes dark with concern. "Captain, incoming encrypted transmission. Not Raxian. Origin unknown." Elara turned sharply. "Patch it through." The screen flickered, then displayed a shadowed figure wrapped in a dark cloak, only their luminous yellow eyes visible. A distorted voice followed. "Humanity moves like a blade in the dark. The Dominion thought you weak. They were wrong." Elara crossed her arms. "And you are?" "A witness. A historian of the inevitable." The figure tilted its head. "The Raxian Dominion was mighty once, but rot has taken its core. Their leaders grow desperate, clutching at power they no longer deserve. They feared you because they know the truth." Tyreek frowned. "What truth?" "That you are their replacement." A cold stillness filled the room. Elara held the figure's gaze. "And why tell us this?" The voice chuckled, a low, knowing sound. "Because war is coming. This was only the first strike. The Dominion will not admit defeat. They will gather their true forces, their armadas, their warlords. They will throw everything they have at you. Elara didn't flinch. And yet you think we'll win? I know you will. The figure leaned forward, their glowing eyes narrowing. And when you do, remember, empires do not fall quietly. They burn. The transmission cut. The screen went black. For a long moment, no one spoke. Tyreek finally exhaled. I don't like this. Elara leaned against the console, processing everything. Neither do I. But if they're right, we need to be ready. Harrow hesitated before speaking. Captain, if they're afraid of us now, imagine what they'll do when they realize how strong we truly are. Elara straightened, her voice unwavering. Then we make sure the next time they come, they regret it even more. The Vanguard turned toward deep space, engines flaring. They weren't running. They were preparing. Because this wasn't the end. It was only the beginning.